and thanks for listening. I'm Daniel Kringer, and this is the SkanFest Podcast, an interview series for the Skaneateles Festival. We are a summer concert series based in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York during the month of August. This year, we are presenting our 46th season. On the podcast, we spend time getting to know our visiting artists who travel the world making music of the highest caliber. Described by the Boston Globe as one of the world's most remarkable singers, American tenor Nicholas Phan is increasingly recognized as an artist of distinction, praised for his keen intelligence, captivating stage presence, and natural musicianship. He performs regularly with the world's leading orchestras and opera companies. Nicholas is also a Grammy Award-winning recording artist and co-founder and artistic director of Art Song Chicago, which promotes art song and vocal chamber music. Thanks, Nicholas, for coming to talk today.
Thanks for having me. It's always so fun hearing your bio read to you.
So lots to discuss when it comes to your singing and your projects, but let's start out with some introductions. Would you kindly share your background with us and particularly how things began for you with music?
Sure. So my parents handed me a violin for my 4th birthday. I think they were hoping it would make my application to Harvard look good. And I don't think they ever really anticipated that I'd want to become a musician.
It caught on.
Yeah. I really didn't like it at first, because they scheduled my lessons for Friday at recess, which to a 4-year-old that's not good.
Yeah.
You can't take away playtime. And, then I had to practice 30 minutes a day, which again, to a 4-year-old feels like forever. So I wasn't really thrilled about it at first. But once I started playing in orchestra when I was about 11, I really caught the bug and decided I really needed to be a musician. And so I studied violin pretty seriously for a while there. And then along the way, I tried singing because I also was bitten by the theater bug, the drama bug, and auditioned for a musical. And that's when I realized I could sing. And eventually, one summer at the Interlochen Arts Camp in upstate Michigan, I was a musical theater major there. And I was starting to take voice lessons for real for the first time. And that's when I realized, you can sing classical music. I think this is where I really should be.
Oh, so, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your parents musical as well, or no?
My parents were music lovers. My dad was a huge classical music lover. And I think that's also another reason why I got that violin. Mm-hmm. He really wished he had learned how to play an instrument when he was younger. But they were scientists, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, as you kind of got further along, finding singing was pulling you into the arts, was there a moment you experienced that sort of clarified for you that music would be a vocation for you? Or was it maybe more gradual? Some people say both.
There were 2 moments, I think. One was that moment playing in orchestra for the first time when I thought, you can make music with other people.
Yeah.
That's when I got really passionate about it. And I started to really get interested in just the classical music repertoire. And so that was the first thing where I was like, I really want to be a musician. I even started studying viola because I kind of knew that my violin playing wasn't so great. And that obviously
sneaking in on the viola.
I know, it made it worse, honestly. And then when I started singing, there was, a few years later, 5 years later, there was just this sort of aha moment, this is the way you can do this. So I kind of joke with people sometimes that the only reason I sing is because it's the only way I could be a professional musician.
Great. So it seems like your music studies kind of took you all over the U.S. Started in Michigan. You were down in Texas at the Opera Studio in Houston. You were in New York and a lot more. Do you think you could just talk about your experience going through this sort of pathway? You said you started out with musical theater and sort of transitioned into classical. Clearly the classical has grown quite a lot, but you still do a lot of musical theater as well? Yes?
I occasionally do some musical theater stuff. About 10 years ago, I did a production of Sweeney Todd at the Houston Grand Opera. If I do crossover things, it tends to be in the opera house or in a classical music situation. I've done Candide is kind of, one of those in-between pieces. I've done that a lot too. Yeah. But mostly it's been, because of that growing up in the string world and kind of playing in youth orchestra and playing in chamber ensembles, I've always really been committed to classical music.
Okay, yeah. Fabulous. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of the pathway that took you through to working professionally now, I guess. Did you what was your experience like at Houston Grand Opera? I guess maybe is no good place to go.
Actually, it's funny. When I finished, I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
So, which was very convenient because the University of Michigan is right there. And so I went and studied and got my undergraduate degree there, and actually started working with my teacher when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed in Ann Arbor until the end of college. And then right after college, I did one summer at a young artist program at Glimmerglass nearby here.
Yeah.
And then I went and did 1 year at the Manhattan School of Music of a master's degree. And in the middle of that year, I got into the Houston Grand Opera Studio.
Wow.
And also I had the opportunity to make my professional debut with the Chicago Symphony. I was standing in a teacher's studio having a coaching, and his phone rang. It was back in the days of landlines, and he picked up the phone in the middle of this coaching, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is my time. And he was just kind of like, I think the person you're looking for is standing right in front of me, actually. And he hung up the phone and he said, could you be in Chicago on Friday? And I said, well, sure, why not? And, he said they're looking for someone to sing this really high tenor role in Berlioz's Les Troyens at the Chicago Symphony. So my very first professional engagement for real was singing this role with the Chicago Symphony and Zubin Mehta conducting.
Wow.
It was totally wild.
Yeah.
And so that happened. And then, I also at the same time got into these Grand Opera studios. So I ended up leaving my master's program in the middle of it and dropping out of school. I'm a beauty school dropout. And
for bigger and better things, though.
I mean, because that's what we're training to do is work. And so I had this opportunity to go do that. And so I went down there, and Houston was, it was wonderful to be in the opera house. You learn so much being in the opera house, like especially a major opera house like the Houston Grand Opera. I mean, that first year, Renee Fleming came through to do her first Traviata. Susan Graham came through twice to do big leading roles. Bryn Terfel was there. I mean, I was suddenly on stage singing with these kinds of people, and there's no better way to learn than to stand next to these masters, So it was an extraordinary experience that way.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about singing. The voice is such a unique instrument. It's literally like part of us physically, right? And it's affected by illness and like emotions. Can you just share some thoughts on the voice as an instrument and your experience developing yours over the years?
Yeah. I say that and my vocal fry comes out. It's the voice. The thing I miss about playing the violin is that you put the instrument back in the case when you're done with it, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not feeling great, it's outside of you. So you can still pull it out, and even if you've got a cold, the strings vibrate the same way, and how to where to put your fingers down, and how much to rosin your bow, etc. And with the voice, it's inside you, and so it's always part of you. I mean, what's convenient about it is that it makes traveling with your instrument pretty natural.
I never thought about that. Yeah,
I'm not buying an extra seat for my cello. It's the voice is just in there. But you got to take care of it, and it's a balancing act, because I think because it's such a vulnerable thing, right? You're really relying on these two very, very, very tiny pieces of flesh that are creating a vibration with air that you can really psych yourself out. Sure. So I've had to kind of, over the course of my time as a singer, really figure out a middle road between how do I take care of myself, and also how do I live my life? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know I have colleagues who be like, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. And I'm kind of that way in many ways. Before a show, I really can't eat very much. Mm-hmm. I have to kind of graze all day, and then show days, I tend to really pig out the minute we're done. But you can take that too far. Sure. And, I remember being in France once early on in my career doing a very, very difficult piece by Rossini. And, I was on a tour for 13 weeks doing this opera, and I was super stressed out and nervous about it because it was so difficult. And I thought, I'm going to take care of myself. And I spent 13 weeks in France, and I did not drink a drop of wine. Oh. Yeah. Which, can you imagine spending 3 months in Normandy and no Calvados, no wine? I was barely touching any cheese. I mean, it was ridiculous, and I was miserable. And I remember the very last performance, the night before, there was a sort of party at the Opera House that, like after this, there was the second to last show, there was a reception or something like that. And I thought, screw it. We've got one more show. I'm just going to like be a normal human. And of course, like that last show was my best show because my body had finally
kind of relaxed.
Just relaxed. Exactly.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I from that moment, I was like, I can't like live my life stressed out. Absolutely. So it's you got to find a way to balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. So pivoting a little bit, can you talk about, I guess, in your work, are there figures that you look to for inspiration? Maybe teachers, other musicians, public figures, whichever.
Who inspires me? I mean, that's a tough question to answer because I find so many people inspiring.
Sure.
Yeah. I think I was very lucky early on to have some really wonderful teachers. Mm-hmm. My primary teachers from my early years have passed pretty quickly. They were much older than me, and just, we don't ever get to decide when we go, absolutely. Usually. So they were taken from us a little too soon, I think. But I think about them pretty much every day, in work. And that's partly because like I do their exercises every day, and I think about how their teachings line up every day. And part of the beauty about a life in music is that you're given lessons and then you realize new layers of those lessons every single time. So, I mean, I think about some of the things that they taught me maybe 20 years ago, and I think, oh, I get that in a whole new way now, And so that's beautiful. Yeah. And then another influence that's been really someone I don't know at all is the work of Julia Cameron, the author. Mm. She wrote the book The Artist's Way, and she's got a whole series of books that are sort of in this vein of what she calls creative recovery. Mm. And I turned to her like 20 some years ago because her books, because I was really anxious and nervous and having a lot of problems with anxiety, not just on stage in terms of performing, but also even in the rehearsal room, like being freaked out about like, can I do X, Y, and Z, which I think part of that is because I started so young. I was 23 when I made my professional debut with the Chicago Symphony, and then I was just kind of constantly working professionally and at close to that level or at that level ever since, which meant as a singer, you're kind of growing up in public, which can feel really awkward and anxiety producing. So I turned to her writings really early on, and she really encourages you to treat yourself and your work and as a practice, like an artistic practice. And I know that we as musicians practice every day, but oftentimes it just feels like we're doing that to get ready for the next gig.
Sure.
As opposed to like approaching it as, this is my artistic practice and this is the thing that I'm creating. Yeah. And so that, her tools, like she asks people to write morning pages every morning, and I've done that since 2003, almost every day. She asks you to take walks, she asks you to take yourself on what she calls an artist date. And so I try and do all these things. And, I really employ those practices to kind of, and those are the principles I come back to repeatedly when I'm feeling kind of blocked creatively or, dealing with some sort of stage fright or whatever. Yeah.
Interesting. So maybe connected, maybe not. What do you spend time listening to when it's not for work, or do you?
I have colleagues who say, oh, I love silence. Yeah. We have music all the time. And I just do not get that. I mean, I respect everybody. I love all my colleagues, but like, I really love what we do. Yeah. And so when I'm not working, I'll often be listening to classical music.
Cool.
So, I'm happy to like jam out listening to some rare, like, suite by Pachelbel that no one knows, or, a Mahler symphony or Brahms string sextets or songs or operas. But I don't know. I really love the music that we have immersed our lives in, and I can listen to it all day long. And, I also listen to other stuff too. I mean, I certainly listen to a lot of, some singer-songwriters and
sure. Yeah.
But in some pop music, but I don't know. It's not unusual to hear me listening to Bach rather than any of the other stuff. That's
very interesting from my perspective, having now spoken to quite a few musicians over the last couple of years since we started the podcast. Everybody says something different. And I just think it's cool, the difference in taste. And I don't know how connected it is to the work that you do. Maybe it's not, but just seeing different brains work in different ways. So speaking of recordings, but your recordings, you've recorded prolifically. You've garnered a whole slew of different accolades, including a Grammy win, as well as nominations. I'm wondering if you can just share some thoughts on the recording process. Maybe you can talk specifically about your recording of Kaija Saariaho's Adriana Mater, which won the 2025 Grammy for Best Opera Recording, and certainly any other of your projects. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, related to the Julia Cameron Artist's Way thing, I think early on, I realized I always wanted to record, and I think it's partly because I listened to so much classical music. You know, I would put on these, back in the day, CDs of, these my heroes who were people like Lorraine Hunt Lieberson, Don Upshaw, Anthony Rolfe Johnson, Ian Bostridge, Fritz Wunderlich, Nikolai Gedda, Christa Ludwig. I would listen to these albums nonstop, and I would think to myself, I remember specifically actually noticing the things that Dawn Upshaw was doing with her albums, how they were like really interestingly curated and assembled. And I remember thinking to myself, maybe as a freshman or a sophomore in college, like, that's what I want to do. So, I've always had these goals of like, I want to sing at Carnegie Hall and I want to sing with the New York Philharmonic and whatever. But the overarching goal for me, I think, really was always recording. And it took me a while to figure out how to do it. I think, like most, at least classical singers of my generation, we kind of were trained to kind of, basically get ourselves the next opera gig. And we're kind of going through a system, navigating a young artist program or getting ready for one of our auditions. And when we think about our creativity, the main ways in which we are encouraged to do that as young artists is to think about like, what roles will you sing? And to be honest with you, I was totally bored with that question.
Sure.
Sure, there's some roles that I want to sing, but I would give an interview and someone would be like, what's the role that you're dying to sing? I'm like, I don't really know. I love a lot of operas and there are tons of those roles, but I was always more interested in like, what is the album you want to produce? And so back around, 2008, 2009, I was given the opportunity to make my debut, have a debut recital at Carnegie Hall. And so when I crafted that program, I turned to my recital partner. I said, I think we should lay this down. I don't know what we're going to do with it. It was a kind of, if you build it, they will come situation. And I'm so grateful to the universe because I feel very lucky that it worked. But we laid down that first album. It was an album of music by Benjamin Britten. And, thankfully, people liked it. It won a bunch of accolades and et cetera, et cetera. And that sort of, I found a label that wanted to release it, and that sort of set me on the journey. And, I think in our time, in like the last few decades, there's been a big shift in the classical music world. Like when it comes to thinking about recording, I think people just one generation ahead of me, those people that I was talking about, they all got a contract with a record label, and then the record label is the thing. It was the machine that drove that bus. And this model is, now seems pretty normal, but back in like 2008, 2009 seemed radical because I think most people in much of the industry was still thinking, well, we'll just talk to Sony or EMI and
big labels.
Yeah, exactly. And or Deutsche Grammophon, and we'll figure it out. And I'm kind of grateful that I took that risk. It was, again, I think I was predisposed to it because, there were people in my life who encouraged me to do that. And I was lucky to have those people in my life. And also I was predisposed to it because of that work I was doing by reading the Julia Cameron books and sort of like approaching my work as an artistic practice versus like a job. And so since then, I really love it. It worked well. And so I've just kind of kept working in that vein. And that has also born other work like the Adriana Mater recording. The Adriana Mater project was super special because it was just a really poignant moment. She was at the end of her life when we were producing this, and we were basically preparing a production to perform with the San Francisco Symphony. And Esa-Pekka Salonen is, he had been one of her best friends and one of her closest friends for most of their adult lives. And we all knew that she was not well. Her daughter was Esa-Pekka's assistant conductor. Another very close friend of hers, Peter Sellers, was directing the production. And so there were all these people in her who were doing this because they wanted to produce this piece specifically because they felt it was the one opera of her entire output that didn't get its due. They premiered it in something like 2009, and it just didn't have the success that they felt that it should have. And there were a whole bunch of mitigating factors that, the universe, like Mercury was retrograde or something. Like but I think the opera went on strike for right around the opening. Like it was just a whole bunch of those kinds of out of your control things that sort of contributed to that. And they really believed in this piece, and they wanted to produce it while she was still with us. And, there was a day right before we finished, and when you're doing an opera production, you're like in a rehearsal room and then you move to the stage. And right towards the end of that rehearsal room period, one of the last days, Esa-Pekka came in and he was looking very down. And he came up to each of us and said, we really want Kaija to hear this music because we don't think she's doing well. And we think that this will bring her some joy. And, do you mind if we set up a live stream and some cameras in the rehearsal room while we work today? And, we're like, of course, that's great. And, they did that, and then within 12 hours, she had passed.
Oh, wow.
And so then that final week of, those final rehearsals and getting ready for the performance, it just turned the whole thing into not just doing this piece justice, but also like doing her legacy justice. And, memorializing her in this moment, like right after she had passed. And because we were surrounded by so many people who were family and close friends who were leading this process, it just it galvanized people in the most unparalleled of ways. And so, then we recorded those performances, and it got released eventually on Deutsche Grammophon on a major label, which is great. And I know that Esa-Pekka was happy about that. And I think, to see it win something like a Grammy Award, I mean, awards are so funny, right? They're such a wonderful honor and accolade, but then at the same time, like, it's your work that really matters. Like, you're only as good as your last performance. So, but that moment I thought was meaningful because it was born out of such a special and unique life moment. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm still grateful to the Recording Academy for recognizing the album that way. And I mean, it's very cool that I have a statue at home too. Like, I'm not going to lie. That's also cool.
That's a beautiful story as well to go with it, Wow.
It's a testament, I think, to, I mean, we should always approach our work this way, but, it's a testament to how important it is to be serving something larger than yourselves,
Fabulous. So you are a passionate proponent of art song and chamber music, and you've co-founded an organization in Chicago specifically to promote this area of the repertoire. Can you talk about how that began and what you do at the Institute?
Sure. So I spent, I don't know, I spent 4 summers at the Marlborough Music Festival up in Vermont. And that's a place that's devoted to chamber music. And I was fortunate to go sort of in my late 20s. And that meant that I'd been working professionally, like based on that story about, starting young. I'd been working professionally for a while. And most of that work early on was in opera. And this was another moment where I remember getting to Marlborough and thinking, it's rustic is like a really generous way to describe the living conditions there, at least at the time. I think they've certainly remodeled and built new buildings since then, but it's back then, it was still a college campus, and you could, I remember looking down at the floor and seeing someone had clearly lit a joint and it burned a hole through the floor, and I could see down underneath it. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing here? And within a week, I realized actually I needed this more than anything. I was very close to being burnt out because I was singing a bunch of music that I was not super compelled by in the opera house. And getting this chance to reconnect with the song repertoire and chamber music, which kind of reconnects me to the thing that made me fall in love with music in the first place, which was playing my fiddle in, chamber groups and in orchestras. And, song repertoire, which is where I really first learned how to sing. Those were the first things that my teachers gave me when I started studying as a teenager. And that's really where I cut my teeth as a singer. I realized, this is connecting me to something really important. And so I remember I called my manager and I said, well, I just want to sing more concerts and chamber music and recitals. And she said, well, that's great. There are not a lot of places to do that. And she gave me a bit of a reality check. And I took that information and I thought, okay, I've got some friends in Chicago. There's nothing really happening there in this space at the time. And there really was, it was kind of a dip for the repertoire in the city at the time. And my friends there were complaining about it. And they were pianists who specialized in this repertoire. And I said, why don't we, people are complaining there are not enough platforms. Why don't we make a platform?
Yeah.
Youth is all I can really think.
Absolutely.
I mean, we had a lot of vim and vigor. And so we were feeling confident that day.
Yeah.
So, credit to my two colleagues, Shannon McGinnis and Nick Hutchinson, who are both amazing pianists. They were like, yeah, let's do it. And they jumped in, and Shannon really led the charge. And, she got us a 501c3 non-for-profit status, like before we even knew what it was, kind of a thing. We really have been learning the entire time that we've been going, because we've just, the thing was built out of our enthusiasm and our passion for this repertoire, and wanting to give it a home and build it a home in Chicago. And that was 15 years ago. In a couple of weeks, we're about to open our 15th season.
Wow. Yeah.
And celebrate our 15th anniversary. And we just changed our name to a new name called Art Song Chicago, and everybody's really proud of it. And, we were previously Collaborative Arts Institute of Chicago, because we were trying to underline the chamber music nature of what it was that we did. But Art Song Chicago is something I think we feel really excited about, because it really clearly defines who we are and what we're doing and where we are. So it's a wonderful institution I'm super proud of. We put on about 8 to 10 concerts a year, and we've got various educational things that we do. And we're, we're celebrating 15 years. And as we do that, I think we're starting to think about, well, what's next? So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this makes an apt segue into discussing your program here at the festival. You're presenting 2 concerts, a matinee of Die schöne Müllerin, The Beautiful Miller's Daughter, for those who don't speak German. And that's on Wednesday, August 20th. And then you also have a program centered on English chamber music and art song on Friday, August 22nd. So I'm wondering if you might share, just maybe have some general thoughts about those programs, any decision-making you did coming up with them.
Sure. I mean, you have wonderful artistic directors here.
Sure.
And I'm really grateful, actually, that Aaron wanted to do the Schubert in particular, because we were, even in rehearsal today, we were just discussing how it's been a long, he's never done it before, so I think he's excited to do it, but I haven't done it in a really long time. And so it's nice to kind of revisit this old friend. It's I feel like Schubert's cycle, Die schöne Müllerin, and also he's got 2 of them. There's that one, and then there's Winterreise, Winter's Journey. Sure. They are kind of the pinnacle of what the art song repertoire is, in a way. They really take the art form and show just how much it can do. Schöne Müllerin it's 20 songs. It should be roughly about a 70-minute, 75-minute situation.
Yeah.
Depending on your tempi. And it tells a story over that time. And it's, to describe it as a one-man show is totally not fair, because it's really a 2-person show.
Sure, yeah.
The piano is like an orchestra. I mean, it does so many things. And it's such a demanding piece for the pianist, but also so rewarding, because it tells the story so beautifully. And it tells a story of a young guy who thinks he knows who he is, and he meets a girl and totally blows his mind and, falls in love with her and becomes completely infatuated. And then it turns out she falls in love with another guy. And so then he's heartbroken. And what does he do with that? And it's a beautiful story of young love, even though it has a sad ending. There's something kind of sweet and earnest about it. We were kind of joking today in rehearsal that it's very easy to read these texts and be like, oh, come on, dude, get a therapist. But at the same time, it's real. Like these feelings, we've all had them. And it does feel like the end of the world when your heart's broken at a young age and it's your first love. And, you think you'll never feel that again. And Schubert captures that so beautifully in the music. And, the poetry is lovely, but I have to say Schubert's music really lifts it up. And I think that's why I think of this cycle as kind of like the ultimate art song experience. And so I would really encourage people, if you're hearing this in time, to come see it. To come see it, because it's a really special experience to kind of be taken on that emotional and intimate journey. It's like everything cabaret wants to be, but anyway. And then the British program, again, wonderful artistic directors. They do all right. They do amazing work, and it's so inspiring. And I'm really excited to join the Jasper Quartet again, because they're really dear friends. And actually, we just recorded an album earlier this summer that'll come out on Earth Day of next year. I think the album's title is called Lamenting Earth, so just stay tuned for news about that. But we're going to perform a piece by Vaughan Williams that's for piano quintet. And it's another really powerful piece where like the addition of the string quartet to the piano and the voice combo just unleashes this world of sonic color that is like unparalleled. And it's super dramatic and super beautiful. And the thing that's really special for me about the Jaspers is that Rachel Henderson Freifogel, the cellist, her mother was my orchestra teacher when I was 11 and fell in love with music. So I often joke with Rachel, I'm like, your mom is the reason that I am a musician. And so I've known Rachel since we were kids, and it's a really special treat to be able to make music with someone you've known most of your whole life that way.
And at that level too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Wow. Cool. It's
funny too. She looks a lot like her mom. So sometimes she says something or like looks at me in a certain way, and I feel like I'm that like 12-year-old again in orchestra. But anyway,
that's funny. Cool. You already mentioned a little bit about this, but I want to, if you have any other upcoming projects you want to talk about. You mentioned the album with Jasper Quartet. Anything else you want to mention?
Sure. I mean, I have a really exciting season ahead. I'm in the New York area. I'm mostly going to be in New York City. I'm going to be at the New York Philharmonic again in December for Messiah performances. I'm doing a program of Bach arias and Buxtehude arias with a group called Theotokos at St. John the Divine that's being presented by Carnegie Hall in February. And, I'm making my debut at the Rome Opera singing Adriana Mater in October, which I'm really excited about. And again, we got our 15th season coming up, and then there's the album release. And actually, I have a bunch of albums coming out. There's another album coming out in November. That's the complete songs of a composer named Rebecca Clark. So that's coming out November 7th. I actually have an album coming out this weekend of a piece by a composer named Joel Puckett. I told you I really like recording.
I hope our listeners are keeping notes.
So just stay tuned for that. Those awesome. Are the exciting projects that are coming up. I mean, and there are more, but it's
fabulous.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Nicholas Phan is with us for 2 concerts, August 20th and August 22nd at the First Presbyterian Church of Skaneateles, New York. To learn more about SkanFest events and buy tickets, please visit www.skanfest.org. Thanks for joining me, Nick, and thanks to you for listening.
Thank you for having me.